Hey, hi, hello, welcome back, or welcome to my channel. If you are new, this update will make no sense, but hi and welcome. If you are an old subscriber, thank you guys for sticking around. I have obviously disappeared for like the last 2 months, and I wanted to do a quick sit down video because it has taken me ridiculously long time to get to this, and part of the update will be about the whys of my, basically going radio silent for the last 2 months. So sit back. I'm going to try to keep this short because I would like to get back into a more regular routine, but I'm not making promises because that is what today's video is about. So someone is screaming outside. Apologies for any weird noises. It is, peak time in the afternoon. There's also potentially a storm brewing outside, and it is so hot so you might hear air conditioning sounds coming from my living room. I, however, am now sweating in my bedroom, so we'll make it work. So this all started back in like April, I believe is the last update that I made. I fully intended to continue, vlogging and recording as I have been, at least on a semi-regular basis. I've been trying to focus on at least 2 vlogs a month just because I don't have the time to do more than that, honestly. Even that sometimes feels like a lot, and that's the trouble that I've been encountering. So a very quick recap. I had a very difficult year in terms of life, work, and health stuff, both for myself and my family. I've been dealing with, I call them 3 elderly parents. Like I consider my grandmother a type of parent to me because she did take a big part in raising me. And my grandmother is, I wouldn't call her a victim of, but that's the only way I could really think about it. She is experiencing late stage Alzheimer's. She is at the stage where we know she will be passing on any day now. We don't know if that will be in the next few weeks, next few months, next few years. We don't really know. Her decline started about 15 years ago in terms of like the stages of Alzheimer's. I don't know the full science behind the stages, but some stages take longer to go through than others. And the last stage is obviously the stage that leads to death. She requires constant care. She requires feeding, she requires washing, all that. My mother is her main caretaker, and this has taken a massive toll on my mother's already not great health. Those of you who've been around on the channel for a while know that I am very concerned about my own personal health. Sometimes I worry that I develop too much health anxiety because of my experiences watching both my parents and my grandparents go through a lot of very complicated health issues. So I am a little bit hyper aware of like anything wrong in my body. And that's part of this story as well. So it's been a huge toll on my mother. So my mother has ended up in several instances where she's needed to go into emergency care. Last December, my dad ended up in the hospital with some major issues himself. So my holiday was spent partly in the hospital with one parent and then partly in the hospital with another parent because they each coincided in having health crises around the same time. And now it is July, and I spent part of June once again with 2 ailing parents. My mother's issue, we believe we have finally figured out what one of her chronic issues is. She keeps landing in the hospital with intense like lower abdominal pain. Again, the health anxiety comes up because my grandfather died of a very rare form of like intra-abdominal cancer, not colorectal. It's called like pseudomucosal. I never get the term right, but doctors know what I mean when I tell them about it. So there is a history of abdominal disease. My mother also has had a hysterectomy and complications with that, all kinds of stuff. So she's got a delicate state of health that has not been made better with her crises. So we believe now that part of her main issue is that she's experiencing chronic UTIs. So there's been a connection between chronic UTIs. She doesn't have great kidneys. She's got a congenital issue where her kidneys have like hydronephrosis. It's not great, but it's also not like a disease that will necessarily like result in dialysis or something. We don't think, at least that's what her doctor believes. fingers crossed. Like we never know. My mother's a complicated situation, so sometimes stuff that maybe doesn't affect one person badly will affect her badly. So we can only hope. I also see the clouds growing darker, so you may start to hear thunder soon as I tell you guys this tale. So it's been a difficult few months, just kind of navigating my parents, my grandmother's continuously failing health, my mother's increasing depression, because let's face it, she's mostly stuck in the house and has been since the pandemic because of my grandmother's frail health, and then my dad's depression as well, because he is diagnosed with depression. So my mother has like lifestyle depression at this point, you know, like the living grief of seeing her mother dying and not being able to do much for her except, you know, palliative care at this point, and just like general maintaining of her health. And my dad's actual clinical diagnosed depression and his own, you know, inability to, you know, walk very far because he has bad arthritis, like extremely bad arthritis over his body. He's got pancreatic cancer. I don't mean for this to be like a super Debbie Downer tale, but like basically this is what I've been dealing with for the last couple of years, just throughout the pandemic. Just like even then, like knowing that both my parents were in complicated health situations and my grandmother as well, so like navigating at that point not being able to see them for fear that I would make them ill. So it's been a lot for the last 3 years. So I realized in June, I turned 39. I am, yes, 39 years old, and right around my birthday, I had this whole like, I'm gonna take a week off. I took vacation because I realized that I had been putting off like my own wellness and self-care for a very long time. Also, just every time that I had some time off, I ended up becoming a caretaker for one parent or another. Like it always consistently happens. And I know that it's something I preach myself, but like if you don't take care of yourself, you won't be able to take care of others. And sometimes we don't listen to ourselves. So I realized when I took my week off and I had all these plans of like, I'm going to write every day, I'm going to catch up on all these projects, because writing has definitely suffered in the last year. I have always had a challenge with, you know, balancing my terrible commute with spare time and, you know, maintaining my workout routine and stuff, because again, my health is a very important thing and I already have health conditions that affect me, so I need to maintain regular movement in order to keep the risk of, you know, complications down. So I had been neglecting a lot of areas of my life, and writing was definitely one of them on top of others. So once my birthday came around and I was on vacation, I had one solid day where I was like, I'm going to do all the things. And I did, and I crashed and I burned, and I realized that I am so extremely burned out. I couldn't do anything else. I just stopped. So it had been building for a while. I mark April as like the time where I kind of like, you know, I think that's when I put up the last vlog. I'm honestly not even sure because I haven't looked at my timeline, but I believe that is when I put up the last vlog. And even at that point, it was a later vlog. Like it had been taking me longer and longer to get these out because like I would record them and then feel so overwhelmed with the thought of sitting down and editing. And that's the same feeling I would get every time I would sit down to write or even sit down to query. Like I was doing these things in bits and spurts and pieces where like I'd get one good day where I was like, yeah, I'm on point and I'm doing the thing. And then I would be exhausted for 3 weeks after that doing the thing. And so I started to realize that I don't think I was in or I am in an extreme state of burnout, but I was solidly heading there. And if nothing happened, then it was going to, like I was going to be unable to do anything. Like I was getting to the point where I started doing research on, you know, like the signs and symptoms of burnout, and it's like, you know, you get more cynical, you get less hopeful about stuff, you don't have the energy to do anything, things that used to bring you pleasure, like you don't really want to do. And the signs were there. Like I could see them in myself. I could see it at work. I could see it when it comes to stuff that I would normally feel passionate about, that I was just kind of like, what does it matter? Like nothing matters anymore. Like I don't care about anything at this point. So that's the headspace that I was getting into. So I decided to scale back and literally just stop a lot of stuff. Just take the time to just rest, to relax, to find pleasure in like little things like just going out and walking, or having a nice, meal somewhere, or just reading a book. Doing things that I used to do more regularly, but I had put off, and just trying to find the pleasure in those activities. Nothing that would necessarily be productive or like become an object of, disappointment if I couldn't achieve something in it, but just in plain enjoyment, watching a show, scrolling on Instagram. But I was doing that a little bit too often. I was like falling into the trap of, just like losing hours just scrolling, which is another sign of like the things going wrong. So I've been focusing on me in that way, and starting to scale back in the last 2.5 weeks. So I started July fully with the intention of doing Camp NaNoWriMo, because I was like, well, I kind of failed at it in May because I was definitely heading into that burnout state, and I couldn't maintain the momentum. And then I was like, well, I didn't really write at all in June. I didn't even open the draft in June. It was like 2 days, and that was it. Because when I did, I had a good solid writing day, and then I couldn't write the next like 2 weeks. It just kept happening. Every time I'd have a good day, couldn't look at the page again for days. So I decided to just fully revert back to the most simplest form of just opening the draft, just brainstorming on the draft, just looking at it and seeing where I could go next, not necessarily pushing myself to meet a word goal or even a time goal. I'm scaling back to the most basic form of sprinting for me, which is like literally if I can get one sprint in, just one full 25-minute sprint, I'm good. If that's all I can write in a day, I'm good. More often than not, I find that I can push it to like an hour, sometimes an hour and a half on weekdays. If I don't, that's fine. I will have achieved what I need to achieve. But if all I can do is open the draft, look at it, and see where I was and write some notes, that's good too. That's where the point that I'm at right now with that. That's been working. I've been finding joy again in writing. I've struggled to get back to querying because I want to rewrite my query again. I think I've sent out enough batches with my, I think I've sent out like 10 letters with this particular query, and I've had a couple of replies and then rejections. But I was like, well, the query is at least getting some eyes on it. I know that it's very hard. Like the percentages are dismal as far as like who gets a deal, and that's a longer story that I've discussed before, that I'm not putting all my eggs in the traditional publishing basket if it comes down to it, but I would like to try that route first. So I want to rewrite the query and start again. I have dragged my heels on that too. I went through a period where I was like, I just, with everything else going on and the state of my mind, I was like, I just cannot handle the constant rejection right now. Like I knew that for my own mental health, I just could not do it. So I just stopped, and whatever was out in the world, I was just tracking like the responses as they would come in, but I was not pushing out anything. And then I started again, like pushing out like a few every month. Then I stopped for like the last month and a half. So I've told myself that I'm going to focus once again on like having like a dedicated day to focus on queries and finding agents. I know that it's summertime and a lot of them are on vacation now, so it's not even like a big push right now to send out a ton of queries because I know a lot of agents are closed. But you don't get anywhere if you don't do something, and that's been the real challenge of how do I balance my goals and my dreams and the fact that I have reached this state in my life where everything has kind of come crashing to a halt because I just can't wrap my mind around doing anything but the bare minimum. So it's been a struggle, but like I said, I've started with the basics, with just like basic self-care. And by self-care, I don't mean your stereotypical sit in the bathtub type self-care, but like actual looking after myself, cleaning my home, making sure that things are at least somewhat tidy. There are bigger issues that I would like to take care of in the home, like my mess of a dressing table area and my closets, which are overflowing. I think like many other somewhat minimalists, the pandemic like triggered something in my brain that sent me into a spiral of consumerism, and I have since stopped that like constant need for like newness because of boredom, but I now have to deal with the ramifications of having too much stuff. And that's become overwhelming too. So that's another aspect that I'm trying to find the time for, to just respond to the overwhelm in the different areas of my life. Work is a whole other situation. It's been a very unstable year for me at work because of shifts in leadership, uncertainty about what my role will be in the future with these situations, and just the state of the world in our institution is how I will phrase that. So it's been complicated, and there are, I can only like avoid the doom scrolling sort of thing so long before like a colleague tells me all the terrible things are happening, and that sort of thing happens. So like I have my days where I'm like, okay, I'm going to take care of myself and I'm not going to look at anything that will bring me down. But then, like my first conversation with a colleague will be like, well, did you hear the latest terrible thing that is happening regarding women or books or freedom of speech or intellectual rights or X, Y, and Z things? And I'm like, oh yeah, we're back at that. That's not great for me right now. So that's where I've been. But in brighter news, like I said, I did celebrate a birthday, so that was nice. I had a really nice time. I also had a sudden urge to dye my hair purple. It did not quite take, so you can't see it. It's also been several weeks, so most of it has washed out, but I cheaped out and bought some stuff that wasn't as good as what I usually buy, so I'm going to try it again and see if this time it'll work, because I would like to give it a purple hue. I also, had some good time, saw some good movies. It's been a long time since and good is relative in the sense of like I had a good time at the movies, which is a thing I have not done in a long time. So my partner has been pushing me also in my burnout recovery to just get out and do stuff that is just for fun, like I said. So that's been nice. I haven't done like the summer movie sprees in a few years, and that's been nice. We've both been focusing on like doing things that used to bring us pleasure before life got so complicated, and that's been a nice aspect of it. And overall, I'm doing okay. Like I said, I'm dealing with some of my own health issues. I won't go into detail because they're the kind of health issues where it's like, well, this might be nothing or it might be something, but right now we don't know. And I'm hoping it's the nothing, but after, my wait and see period, we still don't have answers. So my wait and see period is now a year. So maybe next year I will know if it's something or nothing. And I'm hoping it's nothing, but it always has a chance that it's something. And that's always a little bit of a worry on the back of my mind. Like I said, I don't want to fall into the trap of giving in to health anxiety and then always thinking that there's something wrong with my body. But at the same time, I've seen so many things happen to members of my family that I don't like to neglect my health either. So still waiting and seeing on that. I have a few appointments, but at this point, having 3 conditions that involve, well, let's just check on it a year later, is never like a great thing. Like I go through moments where I am fine and I kind of like forget about this, and then I'm like, oh hey, is that something changing? So I've got PCOS, sort of. I have a diagnosis of PCOS. I have complicated feelings about that diagnosis, but I do have cystic ovaries. So that's always been one of the issues. I have my thyroid disorder, which has been, an issue I've been dealing with since I was a teen. And I have now an enchondroma is the diagnosis, but enchondromas can turn into other things too. And that is a tumor in my bone that probably formed when I was a child, and it just happened to be found incidentally. And now my latest incidental finding was in my lungs. So it could be the result of long COVID. It could be not. And the not is the scarier part. So at this point, the doctor is not concerned. He believes it is, like we said, an incidental finding probably caused by my having had COVID a year ago, and also some recent infections that were not COVID, but I've had 2 bad chest colds in the last year, so maybe that caused inflammation. Inflammation would be the better diagnosis, and hopefully it will disappear in a year and I won't have to worry about this and we'll just get regular checkups. But if not, this just becomes another part of my wait and see anxiety that creeps up on me every few months. And that was one of also the big anxieties that I had in the last 2 months, because it was incidentally found in February when I got a scan to see if my sinuses were in any way affecting my migraines. I went to see an ENT just to like make sure like it can't be anything going on in that area that is making my migraines worse. And so no, there was no connection there that he could find, but they did find an incidental stuff in my lung. So that's been another major part to the very quick spiral into burnout that I've been dealing with, just with like too much health overwhelm, too much work overwhelm, too much life overwhelm, and it just kind of all came crashing down and led to me disappearing for 2 months from YouTube, among other things as well. So hopefully I am on the mend. I know that coming out of burnout is a very long process. I know that I might, trigger it very easily and fall into a spiral again. Someone is rolling something outside, so if you hear that noise, apologies. But yeah, I am trying to make some commitments, but nothing so strict that it would overwhelm me. But that is that. So I wanted to just check in with you guys, because I know that folks sometimes reach out and want to know like if everything's okay, and I'm as good as can be given the circumstances, and that's all we can do right now. So hopefully you guys are doing well, and I will check in with you guys as soon as possible, hopefully with a proper vlog. I have not recorded any of my outings recently just because I just haven't wanted to turn any of my outings into any kind of work, but I will try to get back to some regular vlogging and sharing little bits and pieces of my life, because it's also like a personal diary to myself, and that's always my intention with recording my days. So I'll check in with you guys later. Have a great evening, day, weekend, night, whatever it is where you are, and take care. Bye. Can't leave you guys without a kitty cat moment. Here's the little girl being cute. It's very hot, so she's enjoying her little box. Yeah, there. And here is this sassy boy. They're mostly just living in the living room because it's the coolest part of the house right now, so that's what's happening here. These little floofs. Hello. Well, there we go.